Good to go right now? All right. Then I'd like to welcome everybody to our July 15th, 2021 regular meeting of the Marysville Board of Education. We previously called the meeting to order for our executive session, and so now we are to the point where we are going to recite the Pledge of Allegiance. So if you all stand up and join me. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. First on our agenda tonight, I accept a motion to adopt tonight's agenda.
So moved.
Moved by Ms. Powers.
Second.
Second by Ms. Savage. Roll call.
Ms. Powers?
Yes.
Ms. Savage?
Yes.
Mr. Luke?
Yes.
Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Ms. Devine?
Yes, motion carries. And now we are going to have a district data update. Mr. Mark Gallagher. Hi, Mark. Thank you for coming to our meeting, and thank you for all the time that you spent putting all this information together for us.
It's nothing. Just doing my job.
Okay.
So thanks for having me. I do appreciate it. And I did want to take just a few moments tonight just to provide you an update, like you had said, on just what our state testing outcomes are from the spring administration of our Ohio State tests. Oops. Am I on? Oh, come on. We had this working just a minute ago. Can you slide these? There we go. Okay, here we go. So I just want to point out a couple things before we get started. So at the midpoint, we had done an update mid-year as we rounded the corner in the second half of the school year, and just some points of concern that we had internally were early literacy achievement with our emergent readers. We also had some concerns regarding the social emotional wellness and development of our 7th through 12th grade students. And we were also concerned about the development of our students and their progress and success of our students that are economically disadvantaged, and I'll define what that is momentarily. I do want to point out that this data is preliminary, so we've cleaned it up to the best of our ability. There are a number of different criteria that we have to use in order to determine which kids count for our state, end of the year state results and those that don't. Some of those things are subject to change, but these are very, 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 very close, again, results for where we'll likely end up. Our results also don't incorporate our AP assessment results, which will count for our statewide achievement, as well as alternate assessment of individuals or students with significant intellectual impairments. Okay, so those results have yet to be factored in as well because they haven't been released quite yet. So these results are preliminary, and I'm going to walk through several different groups of students so we can kind of see where did we fare overall across the board in the district with regards to all students. What were the similarities and differences between the hybrid instruction model and virtual academies? We're able to take a look at those things. How did our students that are economically disadvantaged perform? And again, I'll define that momentarily. How did our students with disabilities perform on the statewide achievement results? And again, I'll define what that is momentarily. And then we're also going to take a look just as a comparison to a subgroup of students that don't fit into the other two subgroups. So these are students that don't have disabilities and are also not economically disadvantaged. So we can see what played out with that group of students across the board in our end of the year testing. Okay, so again, just as a frame of reference to kind of tee us up going into this work. So when I refer to students that are economically disadvantaged, I'm talking about students that receive free and reduced lunch. This is a state testing subgroup, so we are held accountable for this particular subgroup of students, and it's included in our state report card as part of the annual measurable objective gap closing measure. That's a mouthful, right? And a district and or a school, so both of either a district or a school can have this indicator on their state report card if 30 or more students meet that particular criteria, so if they receive free or reduced lunch. Okay, and that 30 student criteria is established through the Every Student Succeeds Act, so it's federal law that mandates the number of students that make the subgroup. When I talk about students with disabilities, I'm referring to students who receive special education services through individualized education plans or IEPs. Okay, and they have IEPs because they have a pattern of needs that require specially designed instruction, intervention, or therapies due to their cognitive capabilities, their academic achievement, hearing, vision, self-care, adaptive skills, so on and so forth. This is also a state testing subgroup based upon the same criteria as before, so 30 more students. If we have 30 more students with disabilities, they count as a state testing subgroup, and they count for our annual measurable objectives as well as our value added, so student progress over time. Again, if the criteria is met. And just as a point of reference, I did put the rates of those two populations within Marysville schools. So 18 1/3% of our student population is economically disadvantaged, and just under 18% of our student population has a disability based on the special education criteria. Okay, so again, just as a frame of reference as we talk about our results. I'm going to orient us. There's a lot going on here, so I want to make sure we're all on the same page as we move along. There's incredible consistency between each of these charts. So when I talk about our target line here, which is, my pointer doesn't work on the screen. So there is a solid gray bar at the top, a solid gray line, I should say, along the top. That is at the 80% threshold. 80% is the target that we need to hit from an achievement standpoint as a district to earn our indicator for a particular assessment. And the number of indicators that we attain, or the number of tests that attain at least 80% achievement or proficiency, combined together to give us our achievement letter grade. Okay, so the percentage of those that we quote hit. You'll see a dashed gray line through the middle there of that gray box. That is the 4-year average for that content area. So in the case of language arts, our 4-year average rate of proficiency in language arts is 75%. Okay, so 75% of our kids on average over the last 4 years of state tests, publicly available state testing data, attain proficiency. There's also a gray box up here as well. I'm going to come over here and just kind of point it out. So there's that gray box or band that extends across the charts as well. That is the standard deviation or the typical range, again, over the last 4 years that our state achievement results fall. Okay, it's important to have that as a point of reference so we can see how did we perform relative to our 4-year average and how did we perform relative to what is considered typical for Marysville schools over the last 4 years. Okay, I've also included, and can you make that bottom bar go away? You can't make it go away. Kind of stinks. So I have the 2019 data alongside the 2021 data for Marysville schools. So again, another point of reference. So where were we in 2019 relative to the current school year? And I've also included the state average for each individual assessment. That's in red. So red is the state average. So that's how the state of Ohio at large performed in that particular area, okay, in that particular assessment.
And general reminder is 2020, we didn't take assessments.
Correct.
If you remember, that's when we were not in session.
Right.
So that's why we're going to use 2019 as our point of reference because it's the closest state testing data that we have at our disposal. And what you'll notice as we progress through these different slides, we're going to start by looking at all students at large. A significant number of tests that we took this year still fall within the standard deviation or the typical range in which we would perform compared to the last 4 years. And in every instance, we always exceed the state average, okay, for each individual assessment, okay? So,
Sorry, are those state averages by student or by district?
the state average is of all the assessments that were given for 3rd grade language arts in the entire state of Ohio, the rate of proficiency across all of those students,
Okay.
regardless of school district, was 50% in this case. So half of the kids in Ohio this year,
Right.
3rd grade language arts attained proficiency. Okay, so just looking at language arts, again, we've performed well within, or at the very, very edge of within one standard deviation of where we typically fall. So we're still within the normal range of performance for us. In most instances, we still exceeded or very close to our 4-year average. And in every instance, we exceeded the state average as well. Okay, that's language arts. It's very similar to mathematics. Again, in many instances, we still fall within our 4-year range where we should fall, or we're very close or to exceed our 4-year average. We exceeded the state average in all areas of mathematics.
Yeah, Mark,
Yes.
in geometry,
Yes, sir.
I appreciate getting some of this a little ahead of time. It looks like to me that that's in a particular subject area in which we have struggled, but I guess pose my question. In terms of geometry, is that, because it's kind of a little bit hard to tell, is that one of the more difficult areas throughout the state of Ohio?
I think you could make that assumption, at least when you look at the state average, when only 42% of students across the entire state attain proficiency in geometry.
It's traditionally been that way in the
Yes.
state since
Yeah.
the new assessments rolled out.
Yeah, and I can remember back when geometry was difficult, even when there weren't state standards.
And it's been an up and down area for us.
But that's all, I don't know where you're going, Mark, so I don't want to.
Ask, please ask.
Those are the two most dramatic drops from 2019 to 2021.
I know we had talked a little bit, when you're talking about math, when you think about it, how parents were a lot more involved this last year, so the older those grades get, the more the drop, because I think it was harder for parents to help their students.
Absolutely.
I mean, that would be one observation that I would make of that.
Yeah, and there's a myriad of reasons for why that could be the case, but I think it's a very plausible explanation for potentially what occurred here. So that's mathematics. When we look at science, again, what's interesting about science is actually our four-year state average is above the 8% target line. So we actually exceed, and we've traditionally always hit our science indicators across the district. There's a little disparity in biology, but again, we continue to outperform the state average. And two of the three instances we still fell within where we would typically, at least on the last 4 years of data. And when I look at 8th grade science, we actually exceeded where we were in 2019. And social studies, getting very, very close. Again, it's still exceeded the state average. And our overall 4-year average is above our 8% target line, which again, get us our indicator, so on and so forth. So that's all students. Now I'm going to shift gears a little bit, and I'm going to take a look at hybrid model versus virtual academy. I really wish we could see the things at the bottom. Is there anybody that can right click on that and minimize? Unlock the tasks. Unlock the task bar. It is unlocked. I tried to get it earlier. Okay. So I think I know these, right? So on the left you have the hybrid model, and on the right you have virtual academy. Okay, so that's your comparison. So I again, greatly apologize that you can't see that it actually says at the bottom. But on the left is the hybrid model, and on the right is virtual academy. And what's interesting, especially with like language arts, you see roughly commensurate performance, or within what is the typical range for us, through grades 3 through 5, but then there starts to be a dramatic shift once we attain grade 6 and beyond. And there could be a myriad, again, of explanations for that. It could be that in 3rd through 5th grade, I'm not leaving my child home alone, because I can't leave them home alone. But as we hit 6th grade and beyond, my child may be home by themselves during the day, and they're left with their own devices to do the virtual instruction, things like that. So there could be a number of different explanations for why some of these differences may be the case. But what I do want to point out is the average and then the standard deviation is still consistent across all students for language arts. So that is going to be persistent through these. Those don't shift and change as we move through these different subgroups, again, because I wanted to make sure we had a point of reference for what is typical for the district at large. Okay. Don't tell me the clicker just went. Yeah, it did. Oh, here we go. Here's mathematics. So a very similar trend to when we looked at the all-student data for mathematics. Great disparities between in-person hybrid instruction versus virtual academy. And things true for science and social studies, especially American history. So those were the individual differences between our hybrid, the students that were just in our hybrid model and the students that were within the virtual academy throughout the course of the school year. Do you have a question, Dan? Seems like you had a question.
I was just wondering, is there attendance data for the kids in the hybrid versus kids versus in the...
We can curate that, yeah.
Because I just wonder if it has something to do with them being there and signing on and
Sure. Yeah,
participating.
We could gather that for you and get that to you if you'd like to take a look not a problem. Okay, so switching gears, going back to some of our other subgroups, so I wanted to take a look at students that are economically disadvantaged. Now, again, remember when we were looking at all students, a significant number of our assessments still fell within our grade band of typical range or standard deviation. And what you'll notice is that there's actually a very significant disparity between our students that are economically disadvantaged and where the vast majority of our population perform as a school district. And that trend is consistent through language arts, through mathematics, science, and social studies. So again, this was a point of concern for us as a school district at the mid-year point, and that was articulated in our end of the year.
We asked one question,
Yes.
Mark, and I'm hitting you from left field, so
Okay, all right.
it's not a good time to do it, I know. But that bar represents all students.
That is all students, correct.
So do we know in a typical year where that bar ranges for our economically disadvantaged students? Because hence there's an achievement gap. There's already a gap.
We could absolutely find that out. And then there's also annual measurable objective targets outlined in the state of Ohio that schools are recommended to attain as well, and that's publicly available. So we could get that.
So hence our gap closing. You know how we've
Yes.
talked about gap
Yes.
closing and we've worked to close that gap. A gap already, I think it's important to recognize that a gap already exists, hence there's subgroups.
Yeah.
So, I didn't think about that when we were putting everything together, so.
Well, we've been aware that students that are economically disadvantaged, that childcare, access to the internet,
Access to adults.
access to adults to help and so forth, that those are and continue to be issues and problems. And I know we tried to address those as best we could, so.
So using American history as an example, that disparity is rather significant relative to where we left off in 2019. Between those two groups, let's see, 26% difference. We also took a look at our subgroup of students with disabilities. And again, just as a reminder, where the vast majority of our students land is up there in that gray reference box where the standard deviation and the average lie, 4-year average lie. And while there are significant disparities between where most of our kids are and where our students with disabilities are, what I do want to point out is there's actually a number of assessments where we have commensurate or improved performance relative to previous years, especially 2019. So that is a point of celebration. And again, that pattern proves true throughout several different assessments across language arts, mathematics, science, and social studies.
And I would also add that that's a point of significant celebration, I think, because the rules changed this year with alternate assessment.
Yes.
And fewer kids were able to take an alternate assessment. So some of our highest need and lowest performing students with intellectual disabilities actually engaged in regular test taking. So the fact that we were still in that range, I think, is pretty significant.
Were we able to prep the students for the test situation that they were going to be in?
Do you want to answer that or me? I mean, we've talked about the return to school happened about the same time you jumped into state testing. So some of the things we do to develop test stamina, being able to attend for 2 hours, certainly weren't part of prep for this year. Not as much, the answers to questions, but your ability to focus and attend to that task for that amount of time, or however long it might take you to complete, which really speaks to our students with disabilities for sure, students that might have need for frequent breaks and some of those types of things. So my answer to that would be not as much as years prior, because pretty much upon return, the state testing window opened April 8th or something, at the beginning of April.
Yeah.
So again, points of celebration, but still a significant disparity with where we want to get our students with disabilities. The last group that I've looked at were what I'll call non-subgroup students. So these are students that do not receive special education services because they have a disability, and these are students that do not receive free or reduced lunches. So they're not economically disadvantaged. So this is everybody else. So this is gifted students and anyone else that does not fit into two previous subgroups. And what I will highlight is that we more or less performed commensurate with where we were in 2019 with that subgroup of students. So there was very little impact, if any at all. And in some places, we actually improved relative to 2019 with that group of students. And that was consistent across language arts, for the most part, mathematics, in science, it was absolutely the truth, and in social studies. So, again, but as we had concerns at the mid-year point, those concerns were articulated in our end-of-the-year state testing data, and what we suspected would be true, it ended up absolutely being true.
So can I ask a question?
Yes, absolutely.
See if I'm understanding this right. Would you say that the kids that did the virtual academy that were not special needs or economically disadvantaged pretty much did okay as well as the kids that were hybrid?
Now this does include students that were in virtual academy.
That's what I'm saying.
It's data set as well. So all factors considered. If I just remove students with disabilities and students that are economically disadvantaged, hybrid or virtual academy, we're still commensurate or above where we were in 2019.
Oh, okay, sorry, I was reading that wrong. So that's, under history, left to right is by year, not by virtual.
2019, 2020.
So let me go back to my question. So the kids that did virtual academy did do worse, even if they weren't in the special needs or the economic disadvantage.
I don't have that slide here, but I could find that out for you if you'd like to know that.
Because that was like this,
So,
a very striking result of this data that,
so if I go back to just virtual academy, this is all students regardless of subgroup.
right,
Hybrid
okay, gotcha.
versus virtual
Okay,
academy.
Okay. But this includes the
Students with disabilities.
students with disabilities and the economic disadvantage, which would pull both the hybrid and the
Yes.
virtual down.
Correct.
Okay.
okay, so if you did have any group, if there's any group that did just as well in virtual as in hybrid, that would be good to know. I guess would be another way to put it.
We can find that out for you. Yeah.
Because right now, it doesn't look very good for virtual academy. And that could be relevant going forward, don't you think?
Yeah, we can find that out for you.
Got it.
Thank you.
Yeah. Right. Ryan, if you take if this is all students, the non-subgroup, so these are all the students, whether they were virtual academy or whether they were hybrid, the results that we got were at or above
Yeah.
normally where we would be.
Yeah. Yeah. So
And so, as I look at it, I see that the IEP and the economically disadvantaged, the disabled students, economically disabled students, we saw those subgroups perform particularly, they struggled across the board.
yes.
And I see that as having a significant impact when you look at the total population with no differentiation, all students involved. So,
Correct. Oh, without question.
I think we said at semester time or
Mhm.
January, maybe, we were concerned that that gap was widening.
yeah,
And that, launched, in our experience with COVID, launched our urgency to start transitioning back at that point. So that was one of our concerns that was kind of coming through in the classroom data.
yeah. Well, I know those two subgroups have traditionally had a struggle in attaining as much as they might be possible for them to achieve. And
Hence their federal subgroup requirements, right?
Correct.
So, which aligns to originally No Child Left Behind and, yes, sir, yep.
yeah, okay.
Okay. So that's the facts and figures part of this. Sorry, I lose my voice a little bit. Okay. So also wanted to highlight just the frequency of students that actually completed tests this year for each grade level relative to the number of students that opted out of testing or refused to take a test. And what you'll notice is we actually had a pretty significant number of students that opted out of state testing or refused to take state tests this year. It's actually about twice the rate of what we traditionally have in our school district. So usually each year we have about 100 kids opt out of state testing, and we had just north of 200 students this year in grades K through 12 opt out of state testing. Good, bad, or indifferent, right? Like those are, they could help us, they could hurt us, who knows? So I just wanted to highlight that there was a pretty significant disparity. And then on the number of students tested, I just have a couple asterisks on grades 10, 11, and 12. It can be very, very difficult to ascertain the exact number of individual students that tested because, especially in grades 11 and 12, there's no uniform necessarily assessment that students have to take. So some of them may take government, others will take AP government. So if I'm just counting the government tests, will I completely leave out the AP assessment? So those are very, very close approximations of how many students actually took assessments in grades 10, 11, and 12. In grade 10, we'll have students that have taken geometry their freshman year, so they wouldn't count their 10th grade year, so on and so forth. So again, not perfect numbers on the number of students that tested, but very, 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 very close on how many
So
students.
if I understand, then grades 11 and 12, you have more, let's say more students that are taking AP classes or more students that might be taking college credit plus.
If they're taking college credit plus, they're probably going to take an AP exam.
Okay.
As part of that.
All right.
For some areas, not all. I wouldn't say
Yeah.
it's universal.
So that's,
Or they're more likely to have already passed
Or-
the test.
Correct. And if they are testing, say, in 12th grade, they're likely to be a retester. So
Okay.
I may have only attained a 1 or a 2 on a previous administration of the assessment. I want to get my 3, which would be proficient.
And with the alternative pathways to graduation, where so that kind of complicated the amount of kids actually engaging in a
right,
test.
so that would explain why the number for 12th graders is so low, because they've either
They could've-
previously taken the test or they've taken some other test, and it
Correct.
may not be that they refused,
Correct.
that the entire senior class refused to take the test.
Right, I mean, it shows 93 students roughly took a test.
Mhm.
You could reasonably assume the other majority of them either earned their points in a different way for graduation because
Right.
there was a waiver in place, if you will, or they previously passed a test, or they took the AP test.
Mhm. Yeah, that's August.
So I just wanted to point out, it can be very difficult to have the exact value for the number of students in 10 to 12 being tested. Just some other information for factors that will potentially impact our final state report card, where kids count. So based on enrollment dates in the full academic year criteria, we may have some students that we're counting in the preliminary results that may not count for us, and vice versa, depending upon when students enrolled and or when they left the school district. We don't have our AP testing results back, so that'll predominantly impact science and social studies in the upper grade levels. We don't have our alternate assessment results yet either, and we had a higher than average rate of testing opt-outs, right? Like I said, good, bad, or indifferent, that could help us or hurt us one way or the other on the final report card. So what are we going to do about it? And I think this is really where the meat of all this lies and the stuff that really matters. So what are we going to do about it? Well, we've already we completed a cycle of summer professional development with our instructional coaches to prepare instructionally for our return to school. We've committed to staff professional development and support for the upcoming school year around a K through 4 language arts framework, as well as supporting impacted populations, whether it's struggling readers, students with disabilities. We were also selected as an Ohio School Wellness Initiative pilot site through a partnership with Miami University, Ohio Mental Health and Addiction Services, the Ohio Department of Education, and we selected Marysville High School as the actual target site within Marysville schools for all of that work, which will include enhancing the robustness of our student assistance program that we have there, specifically around behavioral health, mental health, and substance abuse. So taking the pre-existing structures and just improving upon them, again, because we're very concerned about our 7 through 12 student social emotional wellness, so we're committed to putting resources there to support that population of students. Committing towards student review and skill remediation. So we offered summer extended learning opportunities throughout this year, and then we're already coordinating our fall response so that when we have students walk in the door in August, we're ready to start intervention supports with them when they come back. We've committed to making some shifts in leadership to best meet the needs of our students based on the strengths of the administrator. So we've seen some of that in the upper grade levels as well as down at Edgewood Elementary. We're in the process of making some adaptations to our administrative data meetings, so we meet with principals regularly. And now that we know where quote unquote our problems lie with our particular subgroups and particular populations of students, those are going to be points of emphasis in the upcoming school year. So when our administrators come to the table, we want to make sure that we're assessing, supporting, and addressing the needs of those particular students. When it comes to teacher-based teams, so we're coming together as building level teams, grade level departments, department teams, and the upper grade level, so on and so forth. We're really going to place an emphasis on high impact standards, the things you have to know to do the next set of standards, right? That'll tell us a lot about where our kids are at, and that'll give us a really good gauge on how they're progressing throughout the course of the school year. Probably one of the most important things on here is being able to return to our personalized learning practice and methodology. And in the next slide, I'll highlight how that's played out in Marysville schools. We want to get back to the playbook, so to speak, right? The things that we know work. And when it comes to our principals, we'll have some Board of Education updates that are inclusive of their response strategies as well as outcomes data at the building level too. So I have district level stuff. We'll have some building level data coming in from our principals as well moving forward. So that's the response.
So is the virtual academy done then? Or is that an option going forward?
Virtual Academy is an option going forward 6/12.
Okay, so is there anything on that list of responses that addresses the virtual academy directly?
I would put that under staff professional development and support.
Okay.
So our commitment to making sure.
Because the question that comes to my mind, looking at that data, is the virtual academy, whatever the program was that we ran, I forget what it's called.
Apex.
Is there something deficient with that, or was it people that were running it? I mean, or maybe these questions have already been answered. What happened with Virtual Academy where the results were so dramatically different than the hybrid kids?
So, do you want to talk to that? Or you want me to? I do know, we talked about partway through the year with, there were a higher number of tips at the high school level, which are our attendance reports and meetings, and a struggle for engagement or length of engagement with students on that on a platform. I think we're going to talk about Virtual Academy in my update as well, about changes they're making with doing more of a blended model where students are required to come in part of the time as well as engage virtually. I would also say that our assessment format in the classrooms, we had more response from students. We had kids not completing assessment results to help guide us on where they were performing at the time. So when we were sharing or collecting diagnostic results and comparing those, students were not completing those and sticking to the Apex coursework instead of submitting those.
To piggyback onto that with regards to attendance, and this is completely anecdotal, so take it for what it's worth, but just in a conversation a few weeks back with our truancy officer, our school attendance officer, he went from having 3 to 5 truancy intervention plan meetings per week in previous school years to 25 per week in this school year. truancy became such a problem in Union County that we actually just went through the Juvenile Justice Sequential Intercept Mapping Project, where basically any organization that has a touch point with kids in the entire Union County came together with Juvenile Justice, Rick Rogers, to plan out how we could actually do juvenile justice alternatively around truancy and what that looks like. It was such a problem that literally at a county level we're committed to addressing truancy. So
Is
again,
it possible,
take for what's worth.
I don't think we've talked about this. This is also anecdotal. It seemed to me that kids just picked Virtual Academy. Is that true? Or was there like counseling and discussion with administrators and teachers?
Primarily families picked.
Okay,
Yes.
so is it possible that going forward this year, that like this could be presented to families, that there's some possibility if your kid does this, he's not going to do as well?
Yes, so each student has an entrance. This is one of the changes coming up this school year, and will be required to be put on a success plan, and that's going to be monitored and counseled with the family as an onboarding tool, and then that will be kind of the I want to say the progress monitoring tool we're going to use with families. So these are the goals that we set forth with your student, and they've already created those in collaboration with Fairbanks that we'll look to implement. So kind of what you're saying. If not, then what, right? If you're not going to be successful here, what's the platform in which you're going to find success?
So that's the response. So what does personalized learning outcomes look like for Marysville schools from 2016 to present? So what I did here is looking at, and it's oriented the same way as our other charts. So there's the solid gray line, that's our 80% target. There's our dashed line, which is the average for across all content areas. So all the tests that were taken in language arts, mathematics, social studies, and science, what was the average rate of proficiency over the last 4 years? And then what was the standard deviation, again, across all of those content areas. And then if I go back and I take all the tests that were administered for each one of those years, for each one of the content areas, language arts, mathematics, and I get just an overall rate of proficiency, you can very clearly see over the previous 4 years in language arts, mathematics, science, or social studies, we have great upward improvement from 2016 through 2019, or already functioning at a very high level, especially with regard to science. And then in red, I have the current year's performance as well. So again, we look at all content areas, by and large, for the most part, we fall within the band of what is typical for us, or we're very near, or we exceed the district average, again, for total proficiency across all content areas. So when I say we want to get back to the playbook that we were running, this is what I'm talking about. All right, doing personalized learning work pays dividends for Marysville schools and serves the needs of our students. We need to get back to doing that. That's what we're looking forward to doing in the fall. That's all I had.
Thank you very much for your information. I'm encouraged on one set. I'm very encouraged by the fact that the students that are not part of a category, actually through hybrid model, were able to achieve very, very close to what they would have with a full-time schedule. So that's very encouraging. Again, the gap that we have, which is the gap that we have always had, is now going to be larger. Okay, so I'm looking forward to presentations of plans at each school based on what they're going to do to help close that gap, and also for the kids that had achieved, keeping in mind that those children need to be able to extend. We don't want to hold anyone back to help other kids catch up. So that's where personalized learning actually has its strong suit. But thank you for your presentation.
I think that we all knew that this year was a difficult year, and we knew that some students were going to struggle just because of all the circumstances and so forth that were involved. I'm really pleased that the students that did not fall into a subgroup, economically disadvantaged or disability, that, as Nan said, they performed, whether it was virtual or hybrid, they were able to perform at a high level. And I think that's really good. But I know that we need to double down on the kids that are struggling. And I know that trying to address the factors of being economically disadvantaged are not things that are housed within our buildings. And so I'm encouraged that we are expanding and working on partnerships that might help to address some of those things. And I know that we had the C group, which were those that needed the most help, and they were in our building 5 days a week. And we just need to continue to work to try to reach those kids and try to provide everything that they need. And so while all the data is not something to jump up and get excited about, that there are some issues and problems, that there's also a number of really positive things that were accomplished this past year. So
I think, and that's really the value of this data, is it's going to influence the instructions, so you guys, and even some of the questions that came from tonight, I think will help you dig down a little bit more and make some more plans. So like Nan said, I think we'll all look forward to some of those building presentations and see how things go. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
thank you very much.
I think to segue, we're going to go right on and move into our return to school plan. I think I'm okay if Brayden doesn't mind shooting through. So tonight I'd like to share with you my recommendation for return to school. First, I'm going to kind of recap the end of the school year, our summer school experience, kind of our community experience related to safety protocols and procedures, and then moving into the upcoming school year. So as you recall, we ended the school year 5 days a week with layers of protections, mask shields, distancing, enhanced learning or cleaning protocols, tests. The vaccine started to surface by the end of the school year, and increased ventilation throughout our buildings. As you know, at the end of the school year, we had very low case numbers, very low spread, low quarantines, and really we evidenced 0 incidents that we could prove were school spread. I'm not saying they may not have existed, but none that we could connect or reported to us. As we look forward to summer and where we are now, we've hosted a variety of in-person activities, academically and athletically. We've asked parents, if your kids are sick, still don't send them. We've asked that every year, right? I mean, if your kid doesn't feel well, keep them home. But also continue to emphasize good hygiene, and mask wearing was optional in summer school for sure. We've also experienced 0 cases, quarantines, and isolations during that time through athletic contests and activities, workouts, as well as our academic experiences at the buildings. So I also wanted to I know some of you asked some questions about the youth experience in Union County. So since the onset, there were 7 hospitalizations for 18 or younger, 0 deaths, and the last hospitalization for a child in that age range was mid-April. Currently, we have low spread across our community. And one of the things we talked about at the beginning of the school year really was, things indicated, research had indicated that the child experience might look definitely different than an adult experience or some of our most vulnerable population, and concerns with students taking something home and et cetera. So I thought it was important to take a little glance at, according to our health department, of our most vulnerable population, over 90% of those individuals are vaccinated. And in the 18 and older category, it was over 50%. So certainly, definitely different than last year when we didn't have a vaccine at this point.
And just to clarify, on those hospitalizations of the 18 and younger, that's for the entire county?
That's for the
Correct.
entire county. That's not necessarily Marysville
Okay.
students. It wasn't parsed out that way for us. So recommendations for next school year, be my recommendation, CDC recommends looking at your local experience, right? And doing, making sure you're collaborating with your local health and medical teams to get an understanding of where you are. The recommendation from CDC is, again, if you're sick, stay home, have a testing strategy, ensure your ventilation. If you're unvaccinated, you should wear a mask and continue with your routine cleanings. So my recommendation, based after talking to Union County Health Department, we did make phone calls to our medical advisory team to get an understanding of their experiences and points of view. I am recommending a full return to school. We'll go back to visitors and volunteers being permitted in to the buildings, and field trips will be back in place. We'll continue our safety protocols. We're going to continue to ask parents and guardians to monitor their children. If they're not feeling well, we would like you to stay at home. We will do our best to create conditions for space within the school building and learning spaces. We'll continue our cleaning protocols and some of the new products you saw last year that actually have a long lifespan. We now have test kits available in every clinic in the building. Kim is delivering those as we speak to launch out the school year. Again, testing still requires parent permission. We've continued our ventilation checks in our good space, and then we would continue to make mask wearing optional. So if a family felt as if they wanted their student to wear a mask, just like in summer school, you're more than welcome to wear a mask, but that requirement would in essence be not in effect. It would just be like what we're doing for summer school right now. The only thing that, when talking to Dr. Orsina and the other superintendents in Union County, there was a general consensus from Jason to move forward in this direction, and a kind of approval, if you will, knowing that if something would happen that's unforeseen, we may have to shift, and we're prepared for that given last year's experience.
Right.
There are some things around the Delta variant that we're going to have to continue to look at and explore, but there's really nothing consistent in our experience over the summer or in our community that would launch a concern for changing the platform of the school or moving back to a condition of wearing masks.
I just want to make sure I understand this. When you say full return to school, you also include all the sports, all the extracurriculars like band and choir, and pretty much everything back to normal.
Yes.
And all those protocols on the bottom would be the same for,
Sure. There's a
teams
certain
and groups. And,
yeah. For example, we have some families that want their child to wear a mask, and by all means, we would encourage them to do so if that was something that they wanted to do. At this point, there's no reason, given our current condition, that we would want to or need to require those. Questions that remain, if you click that again, I think something will pop up. Perfect. So transportation falls under federal guidelines. So we are waiting some pending information in this category, specifically with regard to masks. So that is a area we don't have a definite answer on at this point. And also, quarantines and isolation fall under the Ohio Department of Health, their umbrella of compliance. And they have not issued any response to the CDC recommendations that, as of noon today when I checked in, I don't think anything came in this afternoon. So those would be two areas that I don't have complete answers on. And we'll update, as we get that information.
Do you suspect that they will issue some statement before August 18th?
I do suspect that Ohio Department of Health will, and I would suspect the transportation guidelines might be sooner than that.
Okay.
Okay, one thing is, as we're going back, our number one priority is and has always been the safety of students. And I know as we go forward, there's still a lot of unknowns. I think you mentioned Delta variant and so forth. And I know that there will always be a variety of opinions on every subject in our community, but I think it's important that as we worked through the beginning of the year, we gathered data on our own experience. We had some very talented people that were able to put together the dashboard. Thank you. And I think that served a very important tool for us in being able to make decisions that we made. And I will tell you, I'm very pleased that we got to the end of the year without students contracting COVID in our school system, spreading COVID, or teachers and staff and so forth. And I think it's also important for people to keep in mind that it's not just the kids, but we have teachers and we have administrators and cooks and custodians and bus drivers, and we can't operate the school without them. So the safety protocols and the safety of the individuals extends beyond to include everybody in our school district.
So I noticed the Union County Board of Health webpage. They used to post data for our county, I think daily, and then weekly, and now I don't. Is Dr. Orsina planning to keep data this coming year? And I mean, did he
I
talk
don't know
about that
if it'll
today?
be posted. I can't speak to that.
But they're going to still collect it. Like we'll
Yes.
know if there's
Yeah, they're
this thing
required.
about background transmission in the community. We're going to be well informed about that, correct?
Yes. We still continue to meet with him.
Are we required to continue collecting those things? Like, I don't, are you still planning to continue with the dashboard once school opens, or?
Yeah, we have not had that conversation.
Yeah.
We wouldn't have any reason not to.
Okay.
I think families gave us pretty good feedback about being able to see that live. And quite honestly, we haven't had any cases to do
An update.
an
for-
update.
Right.
So we've hung out at, is it 13, 15,
Yeah,
whatever?
it's at 13.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right, the max, right, okay. Good information again. I guess anybody out there watching or attending tonight, if they have questions, feel free to call the board office and.
Yeah, we'll work on a district communication to go out to parents. I might recommend that you guys consider approving
Approving it?
that return you did last
Yeah.
fall.
Mhm.
So if you are good with that plan, that would be your option.
Well, I would certainly entertain a motion if somebody would like to motion approval of this recommendation for the return to school, knowing that there are two question marks there.
So moved.
Motion by Ms. Powers,
Second.
second by Ms. Savage. Any other discussion about that?
I just say I am really happy. I know for myself, asking kids to wear masks and going to a hybrid system were not fun. But again, our goal was safety, and there were so many unknowns, and I'm glad that we ended up where we are, and I know that we'll keep monitoring the situation as we go forward, so.
Well, if we're going to vote on this, I didn't realize we were voting on this tonight, but I did look at it earlier, and I appreciate all of your explanation tonight, but I do have a couple of questions. On the slide, it said social distancing, so what does that actually mean in the buildings?
So it'll be similar to our return. We'll do our best to do 3 feet of distance where we can, similar to our return in the spring.
So like in an elementary classroom, let's say, you remember how it used to be, they had all these different clumps of kids.
Flexible seating, flexible seating.
Is it pretty much going to be the teachers are just back to normal, or is there actually going to be a difference in?
Yeah, where we can get 3 feet of distance, we'll get 3 feet of distance, but it won't be the case in every classroom. And that's kind of how we returned last spring.
Okay, got it. And then the other thing you mentioned was asking people to keep their sick kids home.
Mhm.
Now, I've thought about this a lot over the last year. And I've come to the realization that I've grown up my entire life thinking, when I'm sick, I'm going to work.
Right.
And so I can't get out of bed. And I think a lot of us have sort of been trained in that mentality. And on top of it, a lot of families, it's really a hardship to keep their sick kids home because then they can't go to work. So what does that really mean, like in the buildings, like when a kid shows up and they're obviously sick?
Well, it kind of depends on the situation. Certainly kids with a fever and meeting certain criteria, we call parents and ask them to come get their children. If a student has sniffles or et cetera, we won't necessarily call home for that student, but certainly fever is an indicator. And we may call home and say, hey, your kid, from my understanding, in the little snapshot that Dr. Orsina gave us about Delta variant, it may look like the typical back to school cold in a student. So we'll have some conversations with principals about that. We're going to follow the lead of our nursing staff with that in order to help educate parents. Quite honestly, now that we have some opportunities, we might be better suited to have a student who does not feel well be able to join us virtually for some part of the day, which we weren't able to do prior to last year. So we'll set up those kind of opportunities as well.
So my inclination is to vote for this plan with the understanding that last line that you said about flexibility, that we continue to keep track of what's happening in the community and in the district in case something weird happens, that we need to try to protect people again.
Correct.
Yeah. I do think everybody has a little more awareness of that whole sick thing, because I think we all have gone to work when we're really not feeling too well, so maybe a slightly better compliance rate on that. Keep our fingers crossed, I guess.
I'm staying home from work if I feel anything at all from now on.
Okay.
That's my pledge.
Yeah, Diane, at the end of the year, vaccines became available to those 12 and up to 18. And I know that we offered the vaccine to be administered during the school day at school with parental consent, whatever else was needed and so forth. Will that continue to be something that's offered this fall?
Actually, we have 2 dates this summer, which is part of my other update. July 23rd and 31st at the high school from 11:30 to 12:30, which would coincide with our lunch program.
Mm-hmm.
So if families wanted to vaccinate their 12 and older child, they could come during that time. I think Mr. Chafin sent out a link where parents could sign up to do that. So that would be available. And we'll work with the health department if they want to host additional vaccination clinics. We're happy to do so.
Okay.
Yep. Certainly, if you're an unvaccinated student or a vaccinated student, they're not going to be treated any differently. You're not going to be sequestered to a different part of the building or anything of that nature. So I think that's important to know.
And I think in case people are thinking about this at home or wherever, I just want to make sure it's clear that nobody's going to be asked their vaccination status, whether we're talking about students or staff. Is that correct?
There is no requirement given to a school district to do that. I don't know if something like that will evolve and will be required to have that on a list of, medical records, but at this time, there is no requirement like that. And we would not be asking of that on our own volition. It would take someone else to prompt us.
Okay, got it.
Good point. Any other questions or comments?
Just a confirmation. So in talking with Dr. Orsina, the Delta variant impacts children, students, in the same way that the original one did. Where
Yes.
children are not susceptible, not as susceptible, the danger was in carrying it to the at-risk population.
Correct, and knowing that our at-risk population is at such a high vaccination level was one of those kind of local factors that we looked at in going forward and presenting that plan to Dr. Orsino. So because that more vulnerable population had an over 90% vaccination rate, because we have low spread, because from my understanding, and what Dr. Orsina shared with us is the Delta variant would actually spread much quicker. And by the time we actually knew there was a case, it more than likely might be spread to several other people. So the idea would be that even the procedures would have to look different because quarantine probably may not work. Because you'd be finding out, so far in the rears.
And vaccinations clinics are voluntary.
They are voluntary. And there are lots of opportunities. According to Dr. Orsina, those numbers have definitely dwindled over the past couple months. So in general, his opinion was most people who wanted to be vaccinated by this point have been vaccinated. It would be the remaining population who was making the choice not to.
Okay, great.
All right. Roll call?
Ms. Powers?
Yes.
Ms. Savage?
Yes.
Mr. Luke?
Yes.
Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Ms. Devine?
Yes, motion carries. Thank you for that recommendation. Next, it is time for public participation. Nobody has signed up. Did anybody come here planning to? Would you like to, okay. Do you have one? Okay, then you just need to sign up here, and there's a pen if you'd like. Here we go, give me this one. No, that one works. I don't know if it does. And are you familiar with our public participation policy?
No, I am not.
Okay, so first of all, we're not required to have it, but we want to hear from our community members. So we allot you up to 3 minutes to address the board, and it's not meant to be a back and forth conversation, question and answer kind of a thing. We want to hear from you, and then if there's some follow-up that's required, we'll make sure that that happens. And that's why we get your name and contact information. All right? Okay, and our treasurer will keep track of the time, so if you're going a little bit too lengthy, he'll give you the signal.
Okay. Now?
Yeah, go for it.
I like
Yes,
it.
yeah, right up there.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I'm intimidated.
We're
So,
not too mean.
that's good. I had heard part of the recording from the last Board of Education meeting, and something caught my ear. It was the term inclusion.
I thought,
And that,
could we,
Oh, start with
we
your name.
we usually ask you
Yes,
to
Oh.
introduce yourself.
Introduce your name
Hi.
and address.
yeah, my name is Jeff Lulin. I live here in Marysville, have for over 20 years. So I was listening to the, like a podcast or something of the meeting last June, if I remember, just last month. And a term and an organization was mentioned that got my attention. The term was inclusion, and the organization was called Just Matters. And I thought, inclusion, that sounds pretty good. And just matters, that sounds pretty good. Actually, that sounds like Black Lives Matter, which, well, is pretty controversial as far as whether they really believe that Black Lives Matter. So in doing some research, I found that inclusion is part of the cancel culture that has proliferated across the United States. Whether it's removing people off of social media because their views don't line up with the owner's views, or they just don't fit the common, I hate to use the word narrative, but they just don't fit the narrative. And that inclusion is one of those words. I want people to be included. I don't want to marginalize people and put them out of the way just because I don't see things the same way. But this inclusion is, yes, we're going to take you in, we're going to bring you in, and we're going to do everything to accommodate what you feel, think, and believe, regardless of what anybody else feels, thinks, or believes. And I have a real problem with that. Diversity is important. I took a college course quite a few years ago, and the big thing I got out of that class, it was called Human Relations in Business. And the big thing I got from that was cultures think differently. I was a 25-year-old man, white, obviously, and, I'm barely out of my teens. I thought I knew quite a lot. And I found out that other cultures, lived in Phoenix at the time, so there was a significant cultural varieties there. And I thought, oh, you mean, so these people, the way other cultures think about things and process problems and relate to each other are different than the way I would, and that's okay? Oh, that's pretty cool. So the diversity part, I'm good with that. But I'm not good with the inclusion where we're forced to accept everybody else and we take a back seat to their unique take on life. So I object to Just Matters coming in and doing inclusion training.
All right, thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
And
Thank you.
We do have your name, so if you would like to follow up with anybody, we'll certainly be happy to do that.
Okay, thank you.
Great, thank you. All right, next, we have our reports. Mrs. Savage, Ohio High Point report.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. So I sent out a video clip of an update of the construction progress at Ohio High Point in Bell Fountain. So they're making some real good progress. Looks like they're getting all the systems changed over, and a lot of the big construction has already been done. So they're looking forward to that. August 18th is their first day of school, matches ours. Of course, so they are still going to have some students misplaced for a short amount of time in their at their Bell Fountain facility. But just as a reminder, Ohio High Point has 11 satellite programs at 14 different partner schools. They offer 58 programs to over 5,000 students, and the programs are focused on workforce development type issues. So advanced manufacturing, health industry, aviation, supply chain management and logistics, IT programs, precision agricultural, service industries, and automotive technology. So I'm looking very much forward to the final invitation when the facility is completed. I'd like maybe all of us to be able to go down and take a tour of their new facility, which is preparing young people for their future in the workforce. Not everyone is college bound, and we need to make sure that we are offering opportunities and pathways for people so that they're ready to enter the workforce when they leave high school.
What's the estimated time to complete this project? It's a humongous project.
Right, so early September, or late September is when they think that most of the work will be done on campus. They have some detail work with specific lab shops that's probably going to go on into the next year. But everything should be up and working by the end of the summer, late end of the summer.
Okay, great. Thank you. Superintendent's report.
Okay, I wanted to, I think I mentioned last meeting is topped off at 37. In kindergarten, we are currently sitting at 418 students. Last year, total enrollment was 434. To give you some perspective, the enrollment office has been very busy over the last few weeks. We've talked before, summertime is a very difficult time for us to have an accurate pinpoint on enrollment because students who have moved to another community, normally office buildings don't open until August 1st. So we're not made aware that they've left our district until they've enrolled somewhere else and they request records. So we'll have a better feel as those start coming in at the beginning of August. The first week of August will also be our inter-district and open enrollment shifts. So parents can expect to be receiving information about that by August 6th. Next Monday, just a reminder, from 5:30 to 7:30, we'll be working on our strategic plan. I already talked about the vaccination clinics. We talked a little bit about MVA. I'm sorry, I went off of order. Mr. Stackhouse recorded an update for you on MVA that Braden's going to play. And then I'll talk a little
Good
bit
evening,
about-
everyone. This is Scott Stackhouse, and I would like to give you a brief update on Marysville's Virtual Academy. To start off, I'd like to begin by letting you know that we have been working in collaboration with Fairbanks Local School District. Our goal is to provide an online learning environment for students grades 6 through 12. I will be the point of contact for Marysville schools, and Teresa Goings will be the point of contact for Fairbanks Local School District. Marysville currently has 71 students who have registered to participate. We are in the process of hiring one staff member to oversee this. We will be using Apex as our learning platform, and this will be a blended model. Our blended model mainly will consist of online classes with some in-person support. That in-person support could take place either via Zoom or some face-to-face office hours scheduled between students and staff members. Apex is a learning system that has been around for over 20 years, offering a personalized opportunity. Marysville has been using this system for the past 10+ years. We're very excited to offer this platform for the students who are interested. We have a tentative meeting scheduled for early August to meet with students and staff to answer any questions that they have. Thank you so much for your time, and have a great evening.
So as we talked about our partnership with Fairbanks, we are going to be splitting costs based on enrollment, like weighted enrollment. Right now, it's about 70% Marysville kids and 30% Fairbanks. So we'll wait until the school year starts to see how that balances out and share that cost for staffing, as well as there will be a flat fee of $100 per seat license. We'll buy a district license and they'll submit payment to us for the seats they use, whether that's a student that's attending full-time or a student from Fairbanks that may be attending or want to take an elective course, for example, that's offered. They have some robotics classes and design and modeling, or an elective class or an AP class that they might not be able to offer. So that's at $100 per seat. So I know Teresa and Scott have already been talking to families. I know they have a larger session planned, but they're continuing to do some outreach for people who expressed some interest but have not followed through. And so that we can make sure we account for all kids in that format. Across the district, we still have 5 certified positions yet to be filled, and we have 10 classified openings. Bus drivers continue to be a significant area of need, so if anyone meets those qualifications, we are definitely hiring. It's a central Ohio kind of, you might even say crisis. I think every district you go through has signs that say bus drivers needed. So that's a huge gap for us. We recently did a community survey where you have received the results based on those participants, but our next kind of phase of that was to send that survey out to our own families. That survey went out, I believe it was Monday, and we already have over 1,100 responses. So we'll continue to gather those, sort that information, and get it back to you kind of as a second round. Our next step after that will be holding a series of focus groups. So I will be reaching out to all of you, asking for organizations, groups that you would like represented during those focus group opportunities, and we'll kick those off in the fall, just to really talk about school perception, gather more information about the really kind of 2 issues that we ask about, the idea of income tax and the idea of property tax. So Todd and I will be...
I was just going to say, so kind of go back a little bit and just maybe a quick overview of the purpose of that survey, again, in case there are people listening that...
Sure. So the purpose of the survey was really feedback on growth around the community, feedback on experience in the school district if you had one. So some of the people in the community survey may not have had a student or a grandchild or family member in school. Gathering information about how people learn about our school district and get information about our school district, and also information on the nuances associated with a property tax and an income tax, and an income tax, and some of the kind of vetting out a knowledge base around both of those issues.
Thank you.
Sure. Let's see, summer school extended learning opportunity, the second round is underway at Mill Valley Elementary. The students are so excited and have had a great experience. Feedback from parents has been fantastic. We're also getting ready to kick off boot camps in various buildings as a kickoff for school. So we're excited to get those underway. Just as a reminder, we are using ESSER dollars in order to offset the costs associated with the extended learning opportunities. And I guess on the topic of growth, I kind of alluded to that. As you know, a few years ago, we had a projection study completed. Really, that study indicated that our current facilities would provide for us very well for the next 10 years. With the amount of development that is underway, and also I would say maybe on the docket for consideration, we feel like that survey needs to be revisited. So we will be engaging probably in the next couple of months with our projection company and kind of going back to the drawing board and getting, it's kind of like Todd talks, when we do the forecast, the further out you go in the forecast, the less accurate it is, because you're subject to the next budget round. And I kind of feel about the same way about our projection study. It was great until, multiple new developments and apartments and housing developments have surfaced across the community. So we want to make sure that we are in line and have strategies in place in order to deal with new students coming our way. I believe the one that was discussed just recently at council would have been off of 245, I think in Paver Barnes area, projected 300 students. That obviously is a concern to our system and space and capacity issues. So we will do that projection study and then launch a facilities committee to start to strategize. As you know, in this district, we have bond issues that fall off in 2029. We thought that original projection study aligned nicely with that in the fact that it would be a potential for a no new millage bond opportunity. My concern would be at this point that 2029 is even realistic, so we'll kind of look through that. Ryan will be here next month, Mr. Walker. He is going to talk a little bit about an assessment we had done at the Hope Center as a possibility, as that is still a district property. Also we will look at the Volrath property, which we own, as a potential site, and then also do an assessment of Bunzel Middle School. Volrath property and Bunzel Middle School both have watershed, am I saying, I think, for both of those watershed issues that make building projects a little more complicated. So he'll be able to kind of give us an update on those as potential sites, and then we'll move forward with the facilities committee after our projection study. I think that is all I have.
Thank you. Any follow-up questions?
Diane, the survey that went out, I know, and this may be a question for Todd, I know that, you know, we know at some point that we will need to ask for more money for operations, more kids, and just increased cost overall. At what point did we identify, how long ago has it been that we identified that as an issue?
Identified what is
Like the need for future.
Yeah, that at some point in the future, and we had been talking about 22 and 23, just as kind of a target.
And we've been talking about for the last few years that regardless of what our enrollment did, our state funding wouldn't change.
Yeah,
And my hope would be that now we have a new state funding formula that it would at least grow some with enrollment growth.
yeah,
But we don't even, while the formula has been passed, we don't actually have
Yeah.
the calculator in front of us yet to see what that looks like. But yeah, I mean, we've been talking for years now that any enrollment growth creates a problem because we don't get revenue growth to go along with the enrollment growth.
okay.
In our last levy renewal, I mean, we clearly said we can make it to 2022, 2023. Our goal has always been not to be a levy cycle district, and I'm sure Todd can dwell on that. Most schools really run on a 4 to 5 year levy cycle and are coming back for new money every 4 to 5 years, and it's always been our goal not to be in that position. And the closer we move out, the more concerned we are about becoming a district that would require to be on the ballot every 4 to 5 years.
But right now, the last time we asked for new money was way back in 2008, I believe.
Was the last time we've gotten it.
Last time we got new money.
Passed
Yes,
new money.
that's right. We asked in 2012, and that did not happen, so.
Correct.
Okay, great. Thank you. Treasurer's report.
Okay, a few different updates. One, just an update on the gym project that we talked about last month. At this point, the floor is 100% installed, but it's currently just basically wood colored. It's not painted yet or anything. The bleachers are currently being delivered and assembled as we speak. The anticipation is that it would take 4 weeks for the bleachers to be completed. Once the bleachers are done, the floor company will come back in and do the final staining and painting of the floor. And next week, we should have a crane on site to be installing the rooftop AC unit. So things are moving along well and as expected, and we're targeting the week of September 6th for completion. So at this point, things are looking good to hit the target. As I mentioned, the state budget has passed. You may remember that there were quite some significant differences between the House version and the Senate version. Once the Senate released their version, we were a big fan of that version because we got a much higher increase. But unfortunately, they basically went back to the Cupp-Patterson Fair Funding Act. That's not all bad because we didn't lose money. We will see at least a slight increase because of that. We're projecting about an additional $250,000 next year because of that. Not a major change to the 5-year forecast. It'll probably be about $100,000 less than what I was projecting in the forecast. So big scheme of things, pretty well right on. And again, I guess it's yet to be determined what does our enrollment do to those numbers. So, hopefully, I think it's pretty likely enrollment is going to increase at least to some extent this year, so hopefully that actually increases our funding as well. And I guess the other thing where the House was trying to push for some stability and predictability and trying to pass for a 6-year plan, that was kind of the bad part of the Senate version that got approved, is that we only really have 2 years once again. We only know what's going to be happening for 2 years, and after that we'll be in the same guessing game. Yeah, so that's pretty much it for the state budget. Any questions on that? Okay, and then we'll get the formula actually. We'll get our new. We get what's called settlement sheets. We'll start getting those in October, so we'll get to actually start comparing and see what that looks like then. And finally, just give an update. So June 30 is the end of our fiscal year. So you've received our what I call the cash flow statement. So just wanted to highlight some of the most significant variances on the cash flow. For the most part, they're positive variances. On our real estate taxes, we received $805,000 more than we anticipated in the November 5-year forecast. So I'm going to be comparing back to November for our variances. This most significant amount there was based on Class 2 or commercial delinquency receipts. So part of the reason that number is such a high increase is some of that money should have been received last year, but because it was a delinquent, it wasn't received until this year. But also part of that number is also due to valuations increasing. So some of that number will actually flow through the forecast, but a lot of it was just a one-time makeup payment. Our state aid increased by close to $700,000. Two reasons there. One, the governor partially restored some of those cuts that he made in the beginning of the year. So that was the biggest chunk of it. But then also, due to COVID and the shutdown, our casino tax revenue was really just slammed. But that actually rebounded very quickly, much more quickly than I had anticipated in the forecast. And it's actually up even higher than it was before. So a lot of people were, I think, gambling away their federal dollars. Yeah. The other operating revenue was up $427,000. Two biggest drivers there. I talked in a previous meeting about Board of Revision settlements. So when there's appeals where a company maybe is sold their business, or for whatever reason, we would say, well, we think your company should be valued here, and they're trying to get it down lower. A lot of times that just ends up getting settled, and then we end up getting a check to avoid it going actually into the Board of Appeals, where you can end up getting attorney costs and things like that. So we had probably 3 or 4 different settlement checks that came in right towards the end of the year. There was a significant amount of revenue, 6 figures. And then also our open enrollment numbers, open enrollment in, this year increased significantly, so that was another driver to that. Really, on the revenue side, really the only big number that went the wrong direction was really only a timing issue. So we had anticipated the Permanent Improvement Fund returning that $2 million advance in June, but due to the Permanent Improvement Fund being stronger than anticipated, the TIF revenue going up, I knew I was going to be able to pay back the full $2.7 million, so I didn't want to mess with two transactions. I just waited and did the full 2.7 in July. So that's really just a timing issue. And then also in that same line, which usually is a line where we get next to no revenue, is usually I just put $500 in there as a placeholder and we don't get much of anything. We also received $800,000 from the Bureau of Workers' Compensation, what they called the dividend this year as well. So that line was a significant amount of revenue this year. Really, it's all one-time revenue, so it's not anything that's going to carry through the forecast, but it really did jump up our cash balance for this year. And if you look, so you see the difference there on the revenue side, it says we ended up the year $600,000 ahead of where we anticipated. Well, that number is really 2.6 million, because that $200,000 is just a timing thing. So really good on the revenue this year. On the expenditure side, our personal service, our payroll and benefits are obviously our largest expenditure areas. Both of those ended the year lower than expected, so we were under budget. On the benefits side, we received, along with the BWC dividend, we also received the BWC rebate. And that goes into our expenditure line as a decrease. So that explains the benefits line being under. On the payroll side, we were about $900,000 under our original estimates. The main driver there was the federal ESSER funds that we received. So we were able to use some of those ESSER funds to pay for some of those staffing costs that typically would have hit the general fund. So that saved us significant money this year. We also didn't hire some of the positions that were originally planned for due to the, basically, I think using an abundance of caution, knowing that the shutdown was coming, not knowing that these federal dollars were coming, not knowing, we'd already saw that we were going to get a state funding cut. So that also saved us some money. And then speaking of those ESSER funds, that also is going to, we're probably going to get those for the next, be receiving ESSER funds for probably the next 2 years, maybe 2.5 years, but it's going to actually benefit us well beyond that. So we spoke just probably the last meeting or 2 meetings ago regarding our MEA negotiations, and we just extended that agreement. So one thing there that's going to help save our taxpayers, money for years to come is the idea of when you have a final settlement, typically you can look at a raise, or there's also the idea of a bonus. And obviously, the benefit of the bonus to your staff is that they get a nice upfront payment, but the benefit of the bonus to the district is that that's a one-time payment that does not carry out throughout the years, whereas a raise, once you get that raise, it's just an exponential growth that just continues as a cost, basically infinitely. So with that, with those negotiations, we did a bonus that will be paid this coming September. And if you compare the benefit of that bonus compared to, for instance, a 0.25% raise, that 0.25% raise costs the district approximately $90,000 per year. So you take that number, $90,000 per year throughout, you can see the savings just basically combines year after year of doing a bonus as opposed to a raise. And to further that savings, the bonus is actually going to be paid out of ESSER funds. So whereas a raise is going to be paid out of the general funds using taxpayer dollars, we were able to do a bonus that is going to be paid out of a federal grant. So it's kind of a double, a double savings for the district. One other thing. Sorry, go ahead. Sorry, when you were talking all this through with the teachers, like how was the bonus sort of portrayed? Was it like we were I can't remember how we talked about it before. Was it the all the extra work for from the COVID year? Like how was it portrayed and how was it received?
Well, I can't speak for all staff, but I guess I would just speak for the tone of the discussion, is that I think from the teacher standpoint would be that, yeah, it was a different kind of year. There was just a different kind of work, and it took, I think it took a toll on a lot of people, so I think that bonus was, from their standpoint, it was kind of an act of appreciation for the difficult year. And again, for me, I always look at it financially. One thing I forgot to mention.
Well, it'll be good to touch base with a lot of the teachers this fall and see, like, now that we're sort of out of the COVID year, how people feel about what we just got through, and you know, whether their extra work was appreciated and that sort of thing.
Correct. I'm sorry, any other questions on that before I move on?
No, I get, like, when you say it saves 90,000, and that's like salary and benefits and all those
That's
kinds of
salary
things.
alone.
That's only
That's
salary,
only
so
salary.
that doesn't even take into account
Right.
benefits. Okay.
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay, just to make sure I'm clear, we're using federal dollars and not our regular budget to provide the funds for that bonus.
Correct.
Okay.
And the bonus goes to teachers that are still employed with the district as of the September.
Correct, but the only caveat there would be if we had a teacher retired. So if a teacher worked their full contract and retired, then they would still get it, which that number, you know, is going to be a handful. I did forget to mention, I wanted to point out, when I was talking about the advances, you may remember we also have an advance outstanding still to our self-insurance fund, $450,000. Still not ready to repay that, but I can actually finally give some good news regarding our self-insurance fund. So it currently has a balance of $1.3 million, which is double where we were last year at this time. So that's great news. Now, you know, you got to temper that a little bit, because our self-insurance fund really works on a calendar year basis, and we're looking at this on a fiscal year basis. So July to December really is still going to determine a lot, but right now it's definitely trending in the right direction. So that's the first time I could say that in a long time. So that's very good news. And ultimately could have a big impact on the 5-year forecast, because I wouldn't say I'm projecting worst case scenario each year for insurance, but it's certainly not a good number. It's a significant increase each year that's projected. So if we could get a year with a little to no increase, that would have a big impact. Yeah, so that pretty well highlights the most significant variances. If there's any other questions, that's all for my update.
Thank you, and a great job on that cash flow statement. I mean, to fall within, 1 to 1.5% on both revenue and expenses is very impressive.
Especially during the pandemic.
Especially during the pandemic, yeah, A+ for that.
Todd, how would you characterize the fiscal situation for the school district, just in a couple of words?
I would say we're still in a very strong position. As of right now, I mean, as of July 15th, we have an ending cash balance of over $30 million in the general fund, which is probably the largest cash balance the district has had in the history of the district. But again, I always have to give bad news with the good news. I've talked in the past about our revenue, and our revenue is either flat or declining, and it looks like most likely our enrollment is increasing. So I think we've probably hit the peak on that ending cash balance, and it's, without increased revenue, we're going to be starting to eat into that cash balance.
Yeah. And that's always been the plan.
Correct.
Yeah. Amy, do you remember? I think our cash balance was more like about $3 million.
Yeah,
When I came in.
Yes.
When you came in.
Yeah.
Now to be up to 30,
right.
without bringing in any additional local taxpayer
Right.
dollars I mean, that speaks to some pretty amazing financial management.
Yeah,
So,
Absolutely.
And you two have talked about it so many times, just the teamwork, the collaboration that you have in looking at the resources that we have and just being so strategic and targeting them for student achievement and safety and financial stability, all those kind of things. I mean, it's impressive, so.
Yeah.
thank you.
And one of the things that I think we've kind of seen from the two of you is the fact that as superintendent, you're well aware of where we are financially and the cost of the things that you would like to do within the district. And by the same token, Todd, looking at finances, is also well aware of all the academic needs. And so you have been able to work together collaboratively to be able to set a good course for the district. And it's nice as a board member to know that we're on sound footing. So thank you.
That's it, okay. I just wanted to first thank you for all of those explanations. I know there was an editorial about the bonuses, and I received an email about the bonuses, kind of different views from both of them. And I just think it's so important that people remember that we want you to reach out to us and ask questions. We have amazing resources here. We can give some answers, but we have people who really know what's happening in the district and how things work. And so if you hear something that concerns you, by all means, pick up the phone, send us an email. We want to have those discussions. I know, I feel like the questions, they give us an opportunity to look at something from someone else's perspective. And it reminded me of when we were talking about Board Leadership Institute and those sunglass or reading glasses prop, reminding you that other people see things differently, kind of like what you were talking about. And so I think when people ask questions, it gives us a chance to look back and say, well, maybe we didn't explain something as well as we could have, or also checking to make sure that we have resources on our district website where people can drill down and get some information too. So anyways, I just encourage people to reach out to us when they do have questions, because we know, we want to work together. We know when we work together this last year, amazing things happen, and we can overcome so many different challenges. So I wanted to start with that. And then kind of just, Diane has also said this coming Monday, we are going to have another special meeting, and that's where we're going to be talking about the future of education and how that might impact our upcoming work on revising our district strategic plan. And then to follow up on that, probably late August, I'd like to have a special meeting for us to finalize our board orientation book and handbook as well, and review our work plan. I think after we have a chance to kind of get an idea of where it looks like things are going with the district strategic plan, it'll give us an opportunity to look at ours and see if we need to make any revisions to that. So I'll send something out that kind of start looking at your calendars, maybe that end of August timeframe. Also wanted to let you all know that I have been working with Dr. Kim Miller-Smith on our application for the OSBA Boards of Distinction Award. That's a new award. They just developed it in 2020. It's a 2-year program, so this would be the first year you could receive it. And it looks like we are on track to submit our application in September, so just have to finish up a few things, and then we should be good to go. There's a couple of chamber events coming up. There's a business impact breakfast at URE this next Thursday, July 22nd at 8 a.m. They're going to be talking about Union County housing updates. So I thought if anybody is available to attend this business impact breakfast, they're free. I am on the chamber board, so I do get the emails about that. I plan to attend, so if anyone else wants to go. Thursday, July 22nd, 8 a.m. And then the chamber is going to hold their annual celebration on September 9th.
Let me ask, is there registration for the breakfast?
Yes, you can register on the chamber website for that business impact breakfast. The chamber annual celebration is going to be on September 9th. It's going to be kind of a tailgate-like atmosphere starting at Memorial Health Pavilion with as many uptown businesses as possible open. for you to stop in and maybe eat some things, whatever, and they're going to end up at the Avalon Theater for their business awards and recognition presentations. I know we have got a great partnership with the Chamber. They've really supported us with internships, mentoring, career resources, things like that. So if you can attend, we'll just put that on your calendar. And then finally, for student achievement, I sent you the Success magazine or email, and just let you know that I plan to attend the second annual Student Achievement Liaison networking event on August 18th. They're going to start out with a 30 to 35-minute presentation on the future of education, which will be interesting to compare with ours, and then just a chance to network with the other student achievement liaisons across Ohio. So I'm really looking forward to that, and then I'm going to be working with Mr. Langhouse on a new Success Shorts promotion that Dr. Kim Miller-Smith is starting, and that promotion is going to be highlighting different student achievement programs in districts across Ohio. And so she plans to start with the central region, so I'm going to work with Jonathan and see if we can't send in a few articles about things that are going on in our district, and they'll promote them on their social media and website. That's my report. Legislative report, Mr. Smith.
Thank you. I had phone calls with both Representative Richardson's office and with Senator Renicke's office, and talked about the budget with both of them. The House had passed the Cupp-Patterson funding model, which tried to calculate the actual cost to educate a typical student in Ohio. The Senate provided a different formula, and Todd discussed that. I mentioned that to Senator Renicke's office that we really appreciated what the Senate had done. His office told me that because there was generally overwhelming support that had been demonstrated by, big school districts and small school districts and everybody across the state, the House version was the one that was adopted. And I encourage them at the end of this to, and I think people have fingers crossed that this budget will work the way they think it's going to work. And so I encourage them to look to make longer term commitments, because trying to make a 5-year forecast with 2 years of funding is always throwing darts at a dartboard, trying to figure that out. The one relatively new thing, which is not at all new, is bus safety. And I brought that up and said, now that you've got the budget out of the way, can we do something to try to address the issue with drivers passing stopped school buses, which is an issue in our district and across the state of Ohio. I included in the report some information about the Ohio Supreme Court decision on teachers carrying firearms. The court said that teachers would have to have the same training as police officers. And the Ohio Department, or the Fraternal Order of Police, came out and said that they encourage schools to use the school resource officers, and that's they have a very prominent presence in our school district. Outside of the budget, there was one other bill that I noted, House Bill 82, which altered the ACT and SAT testing that was mandated for students. It allows now an opt-out for parents, and it also includes some changes in terms of the school report card, and I'll let you read that. One of the most significant pieces of the change in the report card is the weight that's given to the 6 different areas that are evaluated. And I listed some new legislation that's just been introduced, and you may find some of those kind of interesting. as you go through. So that will conclude my report.
Can I have a question, Dick?
Mhm.
What's going on with this HB 322 or 327? That's the one about, is that dead? That's about how racism should be taught in the schools in Ohio? Or is that still like in the works? Do you know where that is?
I know that there was a lot of activity in the House, and I know that our Senate tends to take a longer view at things. I can say that there is nothing in the state curriculum. There is nothing in the state model. There is nothing in our curriculum that should be terribly controversial. Some of the discussion that I have seen centers on the question of advocacy. Teachers will teach about something, but they are limited against advocacy. You're going to talk, as a history and government teacher, we would talk about religion and laws and impact in history. If you study British history, the Catholic, Protestant churches and the kings and all that kind of stuff. And while you could teach about that, to advocate that Catholicism was better than Protestantism is prohibited. You can't do that. When you study economics, you study about socialism, you learn about socialism, communism, free enterprise, but to advocate for one is not appropriate. So I understand there's a lot of concern and a lot of debate. I know that in our school district, at this point, based on what I know historically about teaching in the social studies department, our teachers are not advocates, they're teachers.
So do you know, so you think these bills are still sort of proceeding?
Well, they're still active. Now, whether or not the Senate will take them up is another question.
And there's no, in your opinion, and maybe you can speak to this too, Diane, is there a problem in our district with teachers that are, what do you call it, advocating?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, do you agree with Dick that that's not good teaching?
Well, you're quite simply, you can't, right? There's very strict guidelines that you can discuss the topics, but you're not to give your insights, your opinion. You can't advocate for one way of thinking over another. It's even in professional code of conduct as a expectation, I guess I would say, or standard.
So you'd say in our district, there isn't an issue with that, with the people that are teaching any of the relevant subjects. There's nothing that is going on that needs to be addressed, either at the state level or at the board level.
No. I mean, we will be having, actually, our social studies materials adoption starts this school year. And so we'll be having members of our social studies department come and talk on this very topic in August or September. So you can look forward to that too, to gain an understanding about what those specific content standards are and the manner in which they're addressed in the classroom, in light of some of this conversation, as well as it's our adoption cycle as well. So you can look forward to specifics on that topic.
Great, thank you. I think on a lighter note, I did notice that they added an additional year of eligibility for seniors.
Well, that's a proposal.
That's a proposal. Well, okay, that's right. It was a proposal. I thought that's a little late to be throwing that out here, isn't it? Oh, sure. I suppose
Yeah,
that somebody.
yeah.
to bring them back for the school year. But
Yeah,
I thought that was interesting.
For sports, is that what you're
Well,
referring
for
to?
sports or academics.
Right.
Yes, either way. It's just out there as an idea to allow them to have
Yeah.
a second shot at the year.
yeah, that's under new bills that have been recently introduced. And most bills don't go anywhere.
Yeah,
The vast majority of bills get introduced, the sponsor will come in, talk to a committee, and then that's it.
okay, good.
So,
Okay, thank you then. We can move on to the safety and drug report. Ms.
Okay.
Powers.
A couple things here. The Union County Drug Free Coalition would like to thank Jonathan Langles for his work in helping to form the group when we first started getting in there. Wish him well and hope to continue to see and work with him in the future. We also welcome Ken Chafin to the new role at MEBSD and with our coalition. So, just like to remind parents that spring and summer can be busy time for students, and we encourage parents to talk with their children about the safety party strategies that go on during the summer. Normally about 1,500 deaths occur anywhere around the 18-year-olds due to high school and high-risk drinking. So really like to encourage parents to take a good look at that. The Ohio Health Youth Environment Survey, which is the OYES Student Survey News, results for 2019 were sent to Bunsold Middle School, and 714 new surveys were collected in May. That data should be available by August. The number of surveys completed per school, there was 315 at Bunsold, 184 at Marysville High School, 215 at the STEM school, and students in the 7th, 9th, and 11th grades were targeted on those surveys. 13 new mental health counselors were trained with PACS tools for the human services providers. And then Ken had sent me a couple things that pertain. Donna Burke is working with event planners right now to mitigate safety risks and limit alcohol access to minors. So what they're doing is they're surveying in the stores right now, seeing where the alcohol is placed, trying to work with these venues that we do not make the alcohol front and center, that these kids, or they can pick it up and walk out the door. Sean Seck from the UCHD spoke that in the next podcast, they'll feature the juvenile judge and insights with how they are working with families and juveniles in the court system. So more will be coming as we, start the school year, but that's everything over the last 2 meetings.
Okay, great, thank you. Okay, I think we're ready to move into our business section. So I would accept a motion to approve draft minutes from our June 17th regular board meeting and our July 12th special meeting.
so moved.
Motion by Mr. Smith,
Second.
second by Ms. Savage. Any corrections, comments, questions on the minutes? All right, roll call, please.
Mr. Smith?
Yes,
Ms. Savage?
Yes.
Mr. Luke? Yes. Ms. Powers?
Yes.
Mr. Vine?
Yes, motion carries. Next, I would accept a motion to approve a 3% increase and additional $2,500 annuity to Superintendent Allen's contract effective 8/1/21.
So moved.
Motion by Ms. Powers,
second.
second by Mr. Smith. I would note that this is the last year of Diane's 5-year contract, and so we are in the process of discussing a new contract. And with this last contract, the last 2 years, we were required to reopen up for compensation. So there was nothing in the contract that stipulated she would receive a raise or anything like that. So we did have her end of year evaluation this past Monday, and I think everybody was very pleased with how everything was handled in a crazy year. And so we were happy to offer this. At least I am, and I believe everybody, I think we're all on the same page. You're welcome to make comments if you would like to.
Well, I know that it was a rough year for parents, for students, for teachers, for administrators, for community members, and not everybody was happy with every decision that we made. However, I appreciate your leadership through the year. I think that not everybody liked the hybrid plan, but one of our goals from the beginning of the year was to have a plan that we could stick to consistently so that we weren't jerking families and kids between one plan and another back and forth. And I was happy that we achieved that. And I know there were some numbers of concern, but I know you're addressing that going forward. I'm happy about that. So I'm very appreciative of your leadership every year, but in particular during this once-in-a-lifetime
Event.
unpleasant, strange year. So thank you.
I will ditto that, Diane, and to thank you for keeping us in tune with doing the extra work on the data board and everything else that we could see, which helped make our decisions as a board easier. And I know there was a lot of work that went into everything.
We're certainly not in a year of easy decisions. I've probably read more last year than I have in the past several years. Nonfiction, I'm a big fiction reader, but I read a lot of nonfiction this past year. And I appreciate, and it's been expressed to me by many, many parents, the consistency really helped them being moved from one plan to another, in school, out of school. Many working parents were grateful at least to have consistency of plan, and I think that's one of our greatest accomplishments.
Yeah, I was sitting here thinking last summer, you and I had a couple of conversations, and I know you were twisting and turning as to what to do and how to do it, and it seemed like just about every day, certainly every week, there was a new directive from the federal government or a new interpretation from the state or the local health department. And I know that we came about this close to being virtual at the beginning of the year. And that even the hybrid system was a bit of a leap of faith that we could actually pull that system off. But I knew that you had a goal to get the kids into school as much as you felt you could while maintaining safety, which is our number one priority, making sure kids are safe. And as we went through the year, I thought you did with able assistance from lots of input from your staff and other administrators. We're able to put together some coherent information to try to teach people, what were all the factors that we had to consider. And I've always appreciated your focus on personalized learning, not just educating most of the kids, not just educating a majority of the kids, but focused on educating each and every student to the fullest of their ability. And I am very pleased to support this. I think you earned the money.
Yes. And I would say, I know we do always, we compare salaries, and I know we're very cognizant of, what other salary ranges are, and I know that's always been one of our goals. We want to be competitive, we want to be fair to both our employees and our community. So, but yeah, if we had more money, everybody earned a lot this year. I think it was crazy, just, all the extra work that had to go into the simplest things that we felt comfortable doing that we didn't even have to think about. Everyone had to think about them this last year. So, and you kept us updated, as well as all of our parents on such a regular basis. It was greatly appreciated. So, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And with that, I would accept a roll call.
Ms. Powers?
Yes.
Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Luke?
Yes.
Ms. Savage?
Yes.
Ms. Devine?
Yes, motion carries. Next, I would accept a motion to approve the treasurer CFO action items.
So moved.
Motion by Ms. Savage,
Second.
Second by Ms. Powers. Any comments?
I would just note, there's several donations on there, and thank those for the donations. Beyond that, it's only the financials, which we already discussed, so that's it for this month.
Thank you to the donors. And thanks again for a great job on the financials. Roll call.
Ms. Savage?
Yes.
Ms. Powers?
Yes.
Mr. Luke?
Yes.
Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Ms. Devine?
Yes, motion carries. Next, I would accept a motion to approve Paul Devine as MHS football freshman coach and Steve Devine as MHS football assistant volunteer coach.
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Smith,
Second.
second by Ms. Powers. Any comments or questions?
So are you doing anything on the football team?
Who did she say?
I mean, cookies.
What did she say? Where are we at?
We're
Here.
Roll call.
Oh, right
Mr.
here.
Smith?
Yes.
Ms. Powers?
Yes.
Mr. Luke?
Yes.
Ms. Savage?
Yes.
Ms. Devine?
Abstain. Motion carries. Next, I would accept a motion to approve Steve Powers as MHS freshman football coach and Mike Powers as MHS football assistant volunteer coach. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Oh,
I'll second. I'll
Motion by
second.
Mrs. Savage, second by Mr. Smith. Brian, do you have a question?
I really like running the football team.
Okay, no questions. Roll call.
Ms. Savage?
Yes.
Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Luke?
Yes.
Ms. Powers?
Abstain.
Ms. Devine?
Yes, motion carries. And now, I would accept a motion to approve the superintendent items.
So moved.
Motion by Ms. Powers,
Second.
second by Mr. Smith. Ms. Allen, any comments?
All right, so we do have several HR items. I would want to, including new hires, but I'd also like to point out Christy Rowland, who works in our office, will be retiring. And certainly Christy is been with us for quite some time, and she will be here until through September, so wish her well. We also have several supplementals on for approval this time. We also have second read approval of policies. There's also a first read policy specific to harassment and bullying that kind of gets us in line with required language. And there is also a overnight girls golf trip as well.
And one other thing, who's sitting out in the audience? What's that?
Oh, yes. How could I forget? You were here the entire time. So on occasion, as you know, we have the opportunity to assist in the approval of members for the library board. And so we also have, I'm sorry, I left you off my list. We also have, I'm not sure, was this a resignation and replacement, I
Yes.
believe? Yes.
Yeah, we had someone leave midterm.
Okay. As well on my section. So,
Any questions or comments of people?
I would note that the policies that we're going to vote on are for the most part permissive. It allows us to help someone that did not graduate from high school find a way to get a diploma, and we can have innovative educational programs. The food service management, reduced price food services is required by law. So there's nothing particularly noteworthy.
And as you said, on the first read policies, a lot of those are as a result of some of the changes that you had in your admin. So Jonathan, Mr. Langhouse is no longer the Title IX coordinator. Correct. It's going to be Mr. Chapin.
Yes.
And so those policies have to list the name of the Title IX coordinator and the contact information. So a lot of those policies are being updated for that and changing some things to about requirements to report different things. Instead of saying you may report them, it's now you are required to report.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think it's important to note that there's a lot of work done by administrators looking at and reviewing these policies and how they would impact our buildings and our district. And we also engage our legal counsel to review to make sure that we're doing things in the right way.
And I also just would like to, all of the hires on there, once if this is approved, that we always welcome the new hires, look forward to meeting them when we go into the buildings, and for all those resignations, we just thank them for their service, and as always, wish them the best. I know I saw Terry Roman as a resignation on there as well, and I know she's been in the district for a long time, and I always enjoy visiting her classroom. She's always creative. And then the library board member is Abigail Anderton, and she would be filling the term through 12/31/24.
Correct.
Yes, okay, great.
Yeah.
And roll call, please.
Ms. Powers?
Yes.
Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Luke?
Yes.
Ms. Savage?
Yes.
Ms. Devine?
Yes, motion carries. We are now to comments and questions from board members. Mr. Luke, we'll start with you.
Just two things. I have been following this discussion about critical race theory in the schools, the legislation, and the broader discussion that's going on. And I have been talking to people in the district about it, and I've been thinking about it a lot. And the word I would use rather than advocacy is indoctrination. I think there's a difference between education and indoctrination. Education is preparing our students for life. It's preparing them for the skills to go into the workforce, to go on in school, to make their own decisions about their lives, including their political perspectives. We're preparing them to engage in civic life. That's the point of education. And you don't do that by foisting on them a preconceived ideology, whether it's religious or political. So in my opinion, if somebody is indoctrinating in the classroom rather than educating, then they need to be corrected. And the way that we go about that is the principal would correct them. If that doesn't happen, then the administrators would make sure that something is done. And finally, if that doesn't work for some crazy reason, then we would get involved. I haven't seen any indication that any of that is going on in our district. But that doesn't mean I'm not concerned about it or like it, and it doesn't mean we shouldn't talk about it and reaffirm our values, which is that we are going to educate every single student in our district, not indoctrinate.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll keep talking about it. We'll keep thinking about, worrying about, and doing sessions and so on. So it's all good. My second point is, we voted to go back to school basically, and that's really exciting. I think even the kids that don't like school are going to be excited on the first day. I'm excited. I want to go back in the buildings. I missed that last year. So it feels like we're back. It feels like the pandemic is over, but I also saw those numbers that you put up, especially the slide that had the increase, and then the drop. And I'm concerned about that, and I know that you are too. I still remember when we voted for all-day, everyday kindergarten. The only vote, by the way, that got us applause from the audience. And I've been on this board for almost 8 years, and we got one round of applause. But the key statement you made in your presentation was you showed what happens to kindergartners when they have better education in kindergarten, how that affects them all the way to 3rd grade, and all the way to 6th grade, and all the way to senior year. Mm-hmm. So now we're in a situation, we have an entire year where a lot of our kids fell back a little bit. And it's not going to be easy to address that. And we're not really out of it yet, but I'm glad that we're on it, and that you're thinking about things that we can do to redress this.
Ms. Savage.
I want to thank everyone for the presentations today. It's wonderful. I appreciate all the information. I just wanted to follow up real quick. The community focus groups that you're going to be doing, is that kind of part of the strategic plan where you're going to ask, for example, what are you most pleased about the district? Or if there's something you could change, what would you want to change?
That's separate. The
Okay.
focus groups are going to be really centered on the ideas of informing a recommendation to the board around income tax and property tax. We are still holding the other meetings. We have several things going on at the same time
Okay.
on points of pride, and we're going to talk about that Monday night in
Okay.
a little more detail.
Okay. That's it. It's been a long meeting.
Okay, understood.
Well, I'm going to make it a bit longer. You mentioned all-day, everyday kindergarten, and my reason to support that was because we found that remediation was going to the kids that were in the half-day. The state funds half a day of kindergarten, and there's a cost in local tax dollars to provide the other half a day. And we found that all the remediation was going to the kids that were half-day. And I suspected that was a matter of kids that were economically disadvantaged. So as I looked at the numbers, certainly there is room for improvement. There's no doubt about that. But I was also pleased that the English language, in the younger grades seemed to be a bit stronger. And hopefully kids over the last couple of years have gotten a better start in terms of reading and writing, and that has helped them. Want to express thanks to all the people, particularly the custodians that are working so hard to get the buildings in good shape. As you came into this building tonight, the floor out there was polished, and that'll be the case in every school building across here. Last thing, doesn't have anything to do with our school district, but it might help some people in our school district. The child tax credit from the federal government enacted today, and it's $300. You have to qualify based on your income, but it's $300 for younger kids per month, $250 for older kids, designed, I believe, to help support families that may be looking for some extra dollars for childcare. And I know last fall we had parents reaching out to us for help and some guidance in terms of where that might come from. So I would encourage people that have kids to look and see whether you qualify for this or not. There's a lot of stuff online. I don't know if it's available other places, but a lot of stuff online.
Thank you.
Again, thank you for the presentation. Thanks for everything. Thanks to the tech team over here for getting us online for those who can't attend. Just very excited to see this year come about and to see everything return to normal. So let's go. We're ready.
Definitely.
I would just thank you for a vote of confidence. It's certainly a pleasure to serve this community and students and families here. We are excited. We are up for the challenge for closing that gap. I'm not, we moved from a D when I first came to this district to an A in gap closing, so we know how to close the gap. I'm confident in our teachers and principals and structures in place for students. We just need to get them back here and get things in motion. So we'll continue to update you on that, and excited really to have that happen. I'm really excited to announce we're going to have a in-person convocation.
Yes.
It's going to be hosted at Impact Stadium. So we're going to be outside and have some pretty great things planned to welcome everyone back, and it really will be a happy new year to kick off the year.
Excellent.
Yes.
Well, and I will thank our presenters as well, thank our tech team, and obviously, so excited for the school year. I was thrilled when you said convocation is going to be in person, so that's really something to look forward to. And then when you talked about Impact Stadium, it reminded me that we did have a community track meet this last week. I don't know if anybody saw that. I'd seen it because I knew they had like a 100-yard dash run for kids, and I tried to encourage one of my grandkids to be involved in that, and that didn't work. And then I tried to get 3 other family members to do the 4x100 relay with me, but that didn't work either. So, and it sounded like they had tons of people show up. And with that, it made me think about our fall sports teams.
Yes.
They are in full swing right now, so
Yeah.
good luck to all of our fall sports team and other extracurricular participants. Go Monarchs.
And it's
with
going to be
that-
fun to get back into the sports again, full force.
Yes, and so with that, I would accept a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Motion by Ms. Savage,
Second?
second by Ms. Powers. Roll call.
Ms. Savage?
Yes.
Ms. Powers?
Yes.
Mr. Luke?
Yes.
Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Vine?
Yes. Motion carries, and our meeting is adjourned at 8:22.